Turbo and 2K show.
What is up, 2K crew? Yes, it is that time of the week again. It is podcast day. Happy Sunday to all you guys and gals out there. In 2Ks, we got a hell of a show here. It's been one that usually is one of my favorite of the year, just because not that I'm ready to cast summer off yet. But let's be honest, I'm chubby and I'm tired of sweating, so the fall can come at any time.
Yeah, I agree.
And we all know what happens when the leaves start turning. The ball goes from white and round to brown and oblong. And yes, it is college football. It is NFL football. I am ready. 2Ks, we talked about the fantasy draft situation. So that kind of gets the gears going. So yeah, today, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to talk about, we're going to break down not only the Michigan Wolverines schedule, Notre Dame, Ohio State, and Michigan State. Those are kind of the most prevalent around here, and we have one hell of a top five, don't we, 2Ks?
Yeah. We
are doing top 5 college football players that we've seen. So as you guys and gals are sitting in, kind of getting a grip here, look back, and I pretty much said since 2000. Yeah, I was born in 80. You're 11 years younger than I am, so figured we just kind of make it a common ground at 2000. Mm-hmm. So 2K crew, while you're in here live, which we have about 10 people watching live 2Ks. Mm-hmm. So whether you're on Facebook or YouTube, I would highly subscribe. Getting over to I would get your butt over to YouTube. The everything's a little bit more enhanced over there as compared to Facebook. But and while you're over there, hit the like, hit the subscribe button. It's totally free. And then while you're there, ring the bell to get notified every time we go live. And if you're on Facebook, go ahead and both Facebook and YouTube, drop us a comment. Let us know who your top 5 college football players since 2000, because these shows are always better when we get a little bit of chatter. So hop on and let's get a conversation started. Well, 2Ks, we jumped into this, and I didn't even ask how your weekend was.
It was a good weekend. I mean, anytime you get 2 days a weekend off of work, I'll take that anytime. So, yeah, I mean, it was a good weekend. We didn't really do a whole lot, just kind of hanging out and hung around the house, got some things done around there. Kind of a boring weekend, which sometimes that's a good weekend, you know.
Yes. Mine was the exact opposite.
Yeah.
Mine was the exact opposite. We were helping a friend with her wedding, and want to give a big congratulations to Mr. and Mrs. Bodie Chittister. Big kudos to you guys, and it was a wonderful reception, a wonderful service. So congrats to you. And I do want to issue an apology to my classmates of 97, 98, and 99, because we already committed to the wedding early. We were not able to go to the reunion. So I want to issue an apology and say that I missed all of you guys and gals, and hopefully we can run into each other before the next one. Well, 2Ks, I did tease on the thumbnail. Is Michigan going to win the whole thing? College football champs ? Is what I put. So let's start. I mean, and let's be real. Out of the 4 teams we're talking about, this should be the best one. So I figured we'd start out with them and kind of go through and give them a little bit more airtime, just because they've earned it. Mm-hmm. They've earned it. And out of the 4 teams, if we're talking just strictly quarterback play, I mean...
Well, then, that's one of the things, not only just out of the 4 teams we're talking about, but the whole nation. I mean, It's even some of the best teams. I mean, I still consider Georgia number 1, as I think pretty much about everybody does. Mm-hmm. And there's a little bit of a question mark there on who's going to be the quarterback, or not so much who's going to be it, but we haven't seen him. Obviously, Stetson Bennett was there for 12
years.
So there's going to be a little bit of a change there, but I still expect that until somebody beats them. to me, they're the team to beat. They're the best team in the nation. Like, they deserve that number one ranking.
Did you see it was a tweet, just since we brought up Stetson Bennett. He was on the team with Sony Michel, who just retired this year, and he's just going into the league. Mm-hmm. And total sidelight here. He was drafted by the Rams, correct? Mm-hmm. I honestly think you and I have been two of the biggest Matt Stafford cheerleaders, especially when it comes to Lions fans when he was here. I'm kind of curious to see what he's got in the tank as far as NFL. I mean, he's obviously wasn't a first-round pick by any means, but just a little sidelight. Just a little sidelight. And to let folks know, Georgia is the preseason number one, followed by Michigan, Alabama, Ohio State, LSU, USC, Penn State, Florida State, Clemson, Tennessee to round out the top 10. Notre Dame is sitting at 13. And Michigan State is not in the preseason 25. Mm-hmm. So let's dive into the Michigan schedule here, 2Ks. And like we were talking before we started, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that Michigan will be favored in every single one of these games. And I'll even go as far to say double digit. And rightfully so they should.
Really? You think they'll be favored double digit against Ohio State?
I honestly think Ohio State will have a loss before they get there. Yes.
I'd be shocked if they were favored double digits against Ohio State, and I would be shocked if they were favored double digits going into Penn State.
Okay.
Those are the two games. Those are the two games that I look at on the schedule, and I'm like, okay, there's a chance those two teams can play with them. I don't know if anybody else on the schedule. Michigan's going to have to beat themselves to lose any other game as the season goes on. But this Michigan team, what scares me the most is the last 2 years, they've played really, really well. Obviously, last year, going undefeated, winning the Big Ten championship again, beating Ohio State for the second time in a row. But it was like going into last year, even last year, they didn't have, really, really super high expectations. I mean, if you were a Michigan fan, you had high expectations for them, but the nation didn't have high expectations for them.
No. Even going into that Ohio State game last year.
Yep.
The previous
everybody
year,
was ready.
Everyone, I mean, they pretty much beat the dog shit out of the Buckeyes, and they're like, all right, well, it's at the Horseshoe, it's put up or shut up time, and they shoved the ball down their throat from the start of the game to the end of the game.
And kind of in a different way than I think if the people that were saying that Michigan was going to win that game last year, they were saying they were going to win it similar to the way that they did the year before, where they just bullied them and ran the ball right down their throats. Well, they didn't do that. They ended up putting the ball in McCarthy's hands, and McCarthy made the plays to win that game. And then as the game went on, and as you get into the fourth quarter, Michigan's offense kind of started to tire out that Ohio State defense, and then they started running the football on them. But they didn't run the football in that first half. It was mostly big plays.
And that was without Blake Corum, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Corum, and I think he had like one or two touches, and then ended up dinging up that knee again, or it just wasn't good to go, and that was all we were, all we saw of him. And Donovan Edwards playing in that game with a bum hand, where he's got a mitten or glove on, and that's the best part of his game. I mean, he's a very good running back also, but I think the best part of his game is what he can do in the backfield, catching the ball, and making plays there. So,
and they have both those guys back, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and basically the entire offensive line is back, and J.J. McCarthy's back. You have the loss of there's two key players that they lost on the offensive side of the ball. Both of them were drafted in this draft. One of them, Ronnie Bell, we saw him, some highlights of him today with the San Francisco 49ers. He looked pretty decent. And then the Luke Schoonmaker tight end loss is another big one.
Safety blanket.
And to me, when you talk about what Michigan's maybe lacking going into this season, and I don't know if lacking is the word to use, but it's what scares me is, do they have the receivers to make big plays, gain separation? But we know they're going to be able to run the football. So does everybody in the nation. So everybody they play is going to make J.J. McCarthy and these receivers beat them. They're not going to allow, Corum and Edwards. They'll be able to beat majority of that schedule doing what they do and running through them. But when they get to these big games, they're going to have to be able to throw the football. So to me, the Cornelius Johnson, wide receiver, there's last year was a freshman. I expect bigger things out of Clemens. as a wide receiver this year. He's a name to look out for. I always forget the name of the little guy there, but he's the speed receiver. I just know he's number 14, but he's another one that's gonna be a big one for him. But that's what scares me the most is just the receiving. I don't think there's really a hole anywhere else in that entire team. Defensively they ought to be stout, and I'm talking. I think they have the best corner in college football. I think they have some with the addition of the transfer Houseman from Nebraska. Joins an already elite linebacker class that they had. Defensive line, they brought in 2 or 3 pass rushers from the transfer portal to already join up with all-American pass rushers that they have on that team. Like they have depth. They have at every position. The only one that scares me is wide receiver.
We have a comment from Mr. Bradley Newell over on Facebook. He says, so happy Michigan plays Penn State at noon and not a night game, which is very true. Anytime you get in Happy Valley and
absolutely.
It's a whiteout.
Well, you think back, every time I think of, going into Happy Valley, I always think of that team with Saquon, where Michigan was not very good that year, but Penn State just beat the shit out of them. And that always scares me. And even years where Michigan's been really good and Penn State's just been kind of, decent. It's always scary going in there, and Penn State's beat them in that, beat a lot of really good teams in that stadium in big games. And the way that lines up is, it's right at the end of the season. You got Penn State, and then there's a game against Maryland, and then you go into Ohio State. So it's almost in that, in that situation where there is a little bit of a trap game, I think, for Michigan.
Sure. Now, amidst the wedding stuff yesterday, I did see some stuff come out. Is Harbaugh going to be suspended?
It's saying that's all done. It's done for now. They're saying that nothing's going to be set this season. It could affect next season. Look, this shit's a joke.
Yeah.
It needs to just be.
Let's just stop it.
Yeah.
Let's just stop it.
And that's the thing too. When you talk about like a game against Penn State at the end of the season, or these distractions that are going on right now with Harbaugh, is the last couple seasons, this Michigan Harbaugh and the staff, you have to give them kudos because they've put all the distractions aside, and they've just went out and taken care of business, and a lot of and that's been kind of the thing with Harbaugh since he took the job was just the big games. He wasn't able to win those big games. They found ways to lose games against Ohio State, Michigan State, and these last 2 seasons they found ways to win those games. So.
Well, let's go game by game here on the schedule here, 2Ks. They're the first 4 at home. And we'll rattle off these really quick because I have a feeling both you and I agree. East Carolina, dub. UNLV, dub. Bowling Green, dub. And Rutgers, dub.
Yes.
Then they're away for 2 at Nebraska and at Minnesota.
At Nebraska is it's different now, right? I mean,
yes.
You have the new addition of head coach in Nebraska. I still think that now you have to give them some time.
Sure.
They were in such a bad place.
Oh yes. Ty Groman can tell you all about it.
Yeah. So I think over time, they're going to get right back to the winning ways. But right now, I think they're a little bit further. They're not. They're behind. They're behind some of these top tier teams, but.
That's 5 weeks to kind of find an identity.
Exactly, and you're going on the road, and you're going into Nebraska, which is not an easy place to go play.
Same said with Minnesota. You never know which boat they're rowing, which direction they're going. Right. But PJ Fleck never, especially with the big games, never really gets blown out. His teams always come to show up.
And the thing that PJ Fleck has recruited there at Minnesota and what he's gotten is he's gotten a lot of size. And those are the teams that can line up with Michigan. Yeah. You come in with athletes and don't have the size to line up with that Michigan offensive line and that Michigan defensive line, and I think that they just kind of have their way with you. To where PJ Fleck, the way that he's recruited a lot of big guys there in the Minnesotas and the North Dakotas and all them. And those guys are tough and they're big and they know and they can line up and play with Michigan. Now, the other thing that they don't have is they don't have the athletes on the perimeters and in the skill positions that Michigan does have. Michigan has the size and they have all the skill position.
Yeah, for the folks watching live, I did post the schedule here that we're talking about Wording is kind of small, but if the logos are very, very big and vibrant, so I'm sure you guys and gals can follow that. And then they have a home game against Indiana.
Yeah, I'm not worried about Indiana.
No. Then they go to East Lansing.
I'm not worried about them either.
Where, again, you and I were talking before we went live. On paper, this should be a very easy game.
Michigan State's they're not the same Michigan State that they were under D'Antoni or Dan, whatever his fucking name was.
D'Antoni.
Yeah, I mean when he was the coach of Michigan State, they were a scary team to play, because he recruited high school athletes that come in there, and it was pride, and pride was on the line, and that was a huge game, and you wanted to beat your rival. And now with Tucker in town, he recruits a bunch of. You have like grad seniors that are you're recruiting through the transfer portal,
yes.
And I think you've taken away from. You can't bring a guy in that's played 3-4 years at some other university and bring him in for that Michigan game and make that be a big deal. For years and years, D'Antoni was bringing in high school, guys that maybe Michigan didn't look at. Maybe Michigan let them pass, or Ohio State didn't really look at, or some of the other Notre Dame, they went after guys, and these guys that Michigan State was bringing in were being overlooked. Mm-hmm. And I think he was able to build an identity where look, these universities, they didn't want you. Michigan didn't want you. That you weren't good enough to play at Michigan. Well, then they took that shit personal, and it showed up on the field, and they were able to beat Michigan, and they had the better of Michigan there for like a 10-year stretch. They really did.
Yeah.
But now that Tucker's taken over, I think he's done the exact opposite of that by bringing all these. Yeah, he's bringing in maybe better talent, but he's still not bringing in good enough talent. And now you don't have the mind game to go out there and beat these teams. And I think that's a main reason why Michigan State's not what they used to be. So without D'Antoni there, and being now that it's Mel Tucker, they don't scare me at all anymore.
Yeah, I think the only just looking back, I know it's a very short sample size when it comes to Tucker. Was this his third year? Mm-hmm. And
But you can't get worse.
No. You're 100% right. And I think a lot of the reason they got worse is Walker left.
Mm-hmm. And who was another transfer, though.
Yeah, and we've seen what he's done when healthy in the NFL. Mm-hmm. So where's that next guy coming from? Yeah. And that guy needs to be a quarterback.
And you got to get a serviceable quarterback at least. I mean, even when they had Walker, they ran the whole offense through him. But they had a couple very good wide receivers, and a solid quarterback. Well, now since they haven't had a very good quarterback, that situation's been terrible, and the running back game has not been very good either. No. Finding guys like Walker are few and far between.
Yes.
So with him not being there anymore, and like I said, I really think that the way that, not that I liked D'Antoni, but the way that he recruited and how he kind of coached that team, where he took that underdog mentality and ran with it. And at a school like Michigan State, when you are just a few miles away from the University of Michigan, you have to coach at that style to be successful. So
it's very similar to what Izzo does.
Yeah, and I think with Tucker, he thinks that he's just gonna go and get all these transfer portal guys, and they're just gonna match up. And they can't. There's no way that they're going to match up that way. You're not.
No.
People aren't hitting the transfer portal and going to Michigan State. I mean,
no.
Not top end.
Especially and I'm not saying that Michigan State doesn't have NIL money to give, but when you look at some of these other programs that are not bashful about giving it out, yeah. I mean, what's the draw to a Michigan State? Mm-hmm. I think if Michigan State goes on a run and is in the college football playoff in a couple years in a row, similar to what Michigan's doing, then yes, you have the credibility. You have the background to say, hey, this is working, come join us. Why would you leave somewhere to go join another dumpster fire? Yeah, maybe for a paycheck, but at that point, you're not going to win anything. There's not a chance that Michigan State contends for a Big Ten title this year. So with that being said, 2Ks, after the win at Michigan State, they're sitting 8-0. And they come home for Purdue, which for those of you that are wondering, if you want tickets to the Purdue game, as low as $84.
And Purdue is another one. Look, they had a really solid year last year. That was who Michigan played in the Big Ten championship game. but O'Connell's gone, and O'Connell was a hell of a quarterback. O'Connell's what got them to,
Yeah.
to that game, that and them playing in the West there.
Now, is that done this year or next year?
Next year.
Next year. So once USC and UCLA come in,
Yeah.
that's all done.
Yep.
Okay. So this is the last year of kind of the Big Ten that we've been used to
Sure.
here for the
Yep.
last 10 or 12 years.
Yep.
So after they beat Purdue, they're 9-0 heading into the Penn State game, and like Brad pointed out, it's noon on Fox, there can still be a whiteout, but it's a whole. I guarantee the atmosphere is way different during the day than it is at night there in Happy Valley. But in 2K Crew, remember Penn State is number 7 in the preseason polls. So this is going to be a very, very big showdown. But in my opinion, Michigan's still the superior team here.
Yeah, I mean it was supposed to be a really, really big showdown last year, and Michigan just bullied them in that game, and just kind of showed the separation between them. And if anything, I think Michigan's better this year than what they were last year. And the case is out there for Penn State. Penn State doesn't have the quarterback that they had last year. They still they have Singleton back at running back though, and that's and he's one of the best running backs in the nation. And Penn State they always find they're always a very good team. So
they're always a very good team, but when it comes into games like this, they'll be playing a Michigan team who's undefeated, and somehow they have 2 losses.
Yeah.
And they lose to teams that are far, far less than they are. And they're another one of those teams. I'm not going to lump them in there with Michigan State because they seem to have dudes, and their dudes are they're not primarily from the transfer portal, but it seems like they step on their dick more times than they should. So yeah, I think we both agree that's another win, and then they go to Maryland.
That's a game in their schedule that Michigan has to be ready for, though.
Tua's little brother can't still be there, right?
I believe he is still there.
Holy
I think
shit.
he's on his last. I think he's a grad senior on his, so last year there.
Is he going to transfer
the
to
COVID
Michigan
year?
State
The
next year?
COVID, the COVID extra COVID year changes a lot of things.
Yeah, I guess.
And then I think there was a red shirt, injury red shirt that he used also. But I do believe he is still there. They're pretty. They do have, and they have skill position players. They can put points on the board.
But can they stop anybody?
Yeah, and I think that's what it's going to come down to is they're not going to be able to stop Michigan enough. But you're also is it a trap game a little bit too with the big one being the week after.
Well, you're going to like this one. This is from both of our buddies, Harold Scheidel, who 2K Crew, if you don't know Mr. Scheidel, is a huge Michigan State fan. His comment is, Michigan will be superior because they don't play anyone this year. Well, Harold, we're going to get to Michigan State's schedule too. Don't
They
worry.
play their conference.
Yeah, same conference as you, kid. And it all boils down to a home meeting against Ohio State. Again, noon on Fox, as always. Tickets for that game is a little bit more expensive, $456. I guarantee that's for nosebleed seats. Even as someone who doesn't have a dog in the fight in this game, I always circle it, always watch it. And you're right. For a number of years, I watched it just to see how Michigan was going to lose it. It wasn't how Ohio State was going to win. Even going back to wasn't it the J.T. Barrett game where he was short on 4th down and they gave it to him, and that kind of led to the win. So even going back that far, and the past 2 years, I mean, it has been just a ass beating. Is pretty much the best word I can describe it. Harold also says Ohio State will roll the blue. Will roll the blue. Well, Harry, I think if you text message Mr. 2Ks, he might put some money on that with you.
I expect both of those teams to be undefeated when that game is played, and I expect both of those teams to still be in the playoff. Same thing that happened last year.
Like I said, I think Ohio State will have one loss. Prior to this.
Who do you think their loss is to? Wisconsin?
We'll get there. We're breaking down their schedule too.
Oh, yeah,
Breaking down their schedule too.
Yeah, I think that they'll both be undefeated. I think you're gonna see the same thing that we saw last year, where both teams get in. I think Michigan's the better football team. They've showed that 2 years in a row now. The knock on Harbaugh was he was not able to win that game, and now I think the knock is the heat's got to be on Ryan Day.
100%.
Can Ryan Day win that game? Because 2 years in a row now they've gotten bullied and just beat down.
They were definitely not close losses.
Yeah.
You cannot blame either one of those losses on the refs. Those were
The story was that they were the most high-powered offense in college football, and I can't argue it. I think they were. I mean, they showed that in the Georgia game in the playoff last year. They scored 3 points in the second half against Michigan on their home field.
Yeah.
That quarterback's gone.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Who's going to play quarterback for them? That's what we're waiting to see. Obviously they recruit 5 stars after 5 stars, so they're going to have top-end talent to play quarterback. But I've seen a lot of 5 stars that don't play like 5 stars.
And Ohio State is one of those programs that we've historically said that. Mm-hmm. Okay, such and such is gone. Mm-hmm. Hell, did they win a national title with Cordell Jones, who was their third-string quarterback at the time? But you are 125% right. If you're an Ohio State fan and you are not just fanning the fire that is underneath Ryan Day's seat, you are completely asinine. Because the major thing that Harbaugh was getting just destroyed in the media about was not beating it to start out with Michigan State and Ohio State. Mm-hmm. You alleviated the Michigan State. I mean that was the first check off the list. Done. And then it seemed like, okay, well, when's the Ohio State check mark going to fall? And it fell a little later. And when it fell, it was like David and Goliath fall. Boom, made a huge. And then last year it was like, all right, was it a fluke? Nope, definitely was not a fluke.
The thing that gets me, and Michigan has taken care of business 2 years in a row and have kind of shut up the haters, because there for years, like if you saw an article about a Michigan quarterback, all the comments on it were Michigan State fans and Ohio State fans talking about how they blow it, they'll blow this, they have it on them. And now, I just reading on an article about McCarthy about being like one of the top 5 quarterbacks that's returning this year in college football. Yeah. And there wasn't any hate mail at all on it, because they beat Ohio State 2 years in a row. They took care of business against Michigan State now 2 years in a row. So they have nothing, like Michigan State, they're looking for like articles like the Jim Harbaugh maybe possibly being out for 4 games, like that would have fucking mattered.
Not with the first 4 they have this year.
No. And Jim Harbaugh doesn't even need to be in the state of Michigan when they play against Michigan State. That game won't even be fucking close either.
He could pull a Brady Houck and not wear a headset.
Yes. Doesn't so. So that's what Michigan State fans, all they do is try to look for something that they, some kind of a fuck up that Michigan makes that they can comment on, because they suck so bad that they have nothing to talk about their own team on. So they just look for hate mail that they can on somebody else when something comes out about a player or a coach on Michigan. So that's fuck Michigan State.
There you go, Harry. There you go. Let's switch gears now to let's go to South Bend for a little bit. Let's go to South Bend. Let me throw the schedule up here for the 2K crew. Where are we? Here we go. And Notre Dame's PR, or their social media team, decided to take a little bit more creativity with this one. There are no pictures, just fancy fonts. So start the season off against Navy. That one's in Ireland. And as a Notre Dame fan, I love the fact that we're getting this game out of the way. It takes a little bit longer to get ready for that offense. And I again, it's easier to play this game at the start of the season or after a bye week.
Absolutely.
Just so you can be as prepared as possible, because
there's like 3 teams in college football that run that offense, so you never see it. So Michigan or Notre Dame sees it every single year in this Navy game, and having it week 1, they can prepare for 2-3 weeks for this. I expect Notre Dame to handle business in this one.
I do too. Then they have Tennessee State at home. I think that's going to be a cakewalk.
And that's good, too, because they don't even have to put any prep into that. They can put everything into Navy because they know all they need is a couple days to get ready for the Tennessee State game. Get through Navy and just make sure that you're healthy.
Yes. And then they go to NC State. Again, I don't foresee a problem there. But we were sitting in these same two seats last year, 2Ks. Mm-hmm. Not these two exact seats, but doing this show. And I think we both agreed that Notre Dame would get off to a better start than what they did. I don't think any of us saw the Marcus Freeman era coming out as 0-3.
Well, I think you watched week 1 last year where they showed that they could play with Ohio State.
Yes.
It wasn't like Ohio State was ever worried in that game,
no.
But Notre Dame showed that they belong on the same field with them. They didn't just get blown away by them. So for Notre Dame to follow up the next few weeks after that Ohio State game the way that they did last year, that was a total surprise. Yeah,
just shit the bed. And then they have Central Michigan at home, which again I don't foresee a problem there either. But that leads up to the first big game of the season, Ohio State, 7:30.
Is this the one you're calling here? Ohio State's one loss?
Yes.
All right.
Yes, I will stand on that soapbox.
Okay.
And like you and I were talking about before we went live, if this game was week 1 or week 2, I would wholeheartedly say 100%. Mm-hmm. Our quarterback is a better quarterback than Ohio State's is. Mm-hmm. Do we have the type of receiver that Ohio State has? No one in the country does. Mm-hmm. But, and traditionally, Ohio State usually does have a pretty stout defense. But Notre Dame has just as stout a defense as this Ohio State team. So I'm saying it comes down to quarterback play even at week 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think Hartman will find his groove before that. And yes, I am calling that game.
I can't. I have to go with Ohio State here. I hate going against Ohio State in primetime games, night games.
Yeah.
Ohio State shows up. They always show up. Now, if you play against Ohio State at noon, you play against Ohio State at 3:30, maybe you can get them. And but when it's a primetime game, Ryan Day, Ohio State, they normally always show up and play their best football on primetime. So, being that that's going to be the 7:30 night game NBC, I have to go Ohio State there. Just Ohio State's skill position players are just on a different level. Now, they lost a lot from last year, and the quarterback situation is going to be different. But by that time, what is that, week 5 in the season? I think they've had enough of their tune-up games, and they're going to be firing on all cylinders there.
And if you're looking for tickets, 2K Crew, they are as low as $526.
Wow, that's a deal.
Hey,
I watch that fucking shit on my TV, where I can go and piss whenever I want to. I can grab a beer out of my fridge and it costs me about 70 cents. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll stick to the couch.
Yeah, when it comes to big games like that, I much prefer to be at home, just because if stuff doesn't go well, that drive home sucks.
Yep.
You pay $526 for the lowest seat, and probably a normal couple will drop another $100, $150 in just stuff while you're there. So, yeah, cheap turbo wise, that and I know all of these big schools now have the jumbotrons and stuff with the replays and everything else. And I'm sure the overall, just the atmosphere is electric. I get that. But as far as me being lazy, yes. Now, any of these most of these other games that are at home, I would happily go to a game, happily go to the game. But big games like that, yes, I'm always more of a fan to stay at home. And then following the two home games against Central Michigan and Ohio State, we go to Duke. So we're kicking off the ACC portion of we did with NC State. We go to Duke and to Louisville, 2Ks. Do you see a loss with either of those teams?
I do not. I at this point in the season, I only have Notre Dame with one loss. That's just the Ohio State game. Going into Louisville, Louisville will be a challenge.
So USC's the very next week.
Yeah.
No, yes, it is. Yes, it is. Then we get USC at home. I mean, we're probably the Heisman front runner right now. Caleb Williams pulling the strings there, and yeah. But then again, I'm not putting Hartman on that level as far as athleticism, but I think Notre Dame's a more complete team than USC. I mean, when you and I were talking pre-show, I really didn't think about it that way, but I tend to agree with you. So why don't you tell the listeners what you told me as far as USC?
I'm picking Notre Dame on this game, and I'm picking Notre Dame because of what USC showed in the biggest games last year at the end of the season. They every bit should have been that 4 seed in the playoff, and all they had to do was beat Utah in the championship. And not that Utah was a bad team, but you basically need to make one stop in that game. One stop. You have the best player in college football as your quarterback. You're loaded with talent at receiver. I mean, you're loaded with talent all throughout that entire offense, but your defense can't make a stop. When you go to South Bend and play them, play a really good Notre Dame team on their home field, and you can't make a stop defensively, I think Notre Dame I think Notre Dame's defense can make more stops than USC's, and that's the reason why. And the one thing I'm looking at with this Notre Dame schedule is they play a lot of their big games in South Bend, and that's a plus for them.
Yeah.
But I'm picking Notre Dame here.
And then we have a bye, and then we have Pittsburgh at home. And I don't foresee a problem with Pitt. And then we go to Clemson, which again, Clemson is one of those. I saw a piece on Clemson this last week saying that they were asking is Clemson's run as far as being perennial college football playoff teams is that era done for Dabo Swinney? And getting back to something that you were mentioning about, kind of, they're the complete opposite of Michigan State. They don't have hardly any transfers on their roster. I think the main culprit here with Clemson is I think they've been blessed with very good quarterback play up until these last couple years. And yes, was DJ supposed to be the next guy up, after Deshaun Watson? He was supposed to, or not Watson, but Lawson. Trevor Lawrence, excuse me. And we saw when Lawrence was out with COVID, DJ just stepped in and kind of took off. I mean, even when Notre Dame beat them, dude still threw for over 500 yards. So where that regression came from, I have no clue. But it doesn't seem like this next guy, who played, I think, the second half or 3/4 of the year last year, is much better. Mm-hmm. So as far as just going strictly off quarterback play, I think you have to give the nod to Notre Dame here as well.
Yeah, I go Clemson on this one. Being that it's at Clemson, it's a big deal, and Clemson's kind of have had a couple down years here. Mm-hmm. For Clemson standards.
Yeah.
And I think Dabo gets it figured out. And they don't play against a whole lot there in that conference. And that's going to be the thing here with all these teams switching conferences and everything kind of going to these two elite conferences is Clemson is going to have to get out of the ACC in order to keep up with recruiting.
Yeah, which I think all signs point to them going to the SEC.
This thing of Clemson going through that schedule and playing those teams and in the environments like that, they're not going to be able to recruit with some of these top end, especially with these schools that are going to be in the Big Ten and the SEC now. ACC is not going to cut it. These big time schools, and especially when you have Dabo Swinney as your head coach, who's about as polarizing as any head coach comes. So they're going to have to get out of that. But this year, to me, I think they're going to be a team that. Come time where we're picking the 4 teams to make the college football playoff, I think Clemson's going to be right in the thick of things.
There you go. 2K crew. 2Ks is calling it right now. Watch out for Clemson this year. 2Ks, write it down. Then we've got Wake Forest at home. I don't see an issue there. And then we make our last West Coast trip out to Stanford, which Stanford has not been the Stanford of old. That whole Andrew Luck, Toby Fleener, all that crew is said and gone. and they haven't been nearly what they used to be. So I really don't foresee them having an issue with Stanford either.
Yeah, the only thing that gets me with there is it seems like Stanford always plays their best game against Notre Dame. And like last year, Notre Dame was just stunned by Stanford in that game, and got their, and you just had no business even playing with them, and then they get beat. And so that game scares me, especially Notre Dame traveling to the West Coast for it. I'm going to give the nod to Notre Dame, but I think it's going to be a close game.
Close one. Okay. Okay. Well, 2Ks. Let's go to
That's a what 10-2 season for that I had for Notre Dame. What'd you have, Matt?
undefeated.
Oh, you did have them beating USC?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
Undefeated. Okay.
Hey. Swing hard in case you hit it.
Hey.
Right. Well, let's kind of appease Mr. Harold Scheidel here, 2Ks.
Oh, Jesus.
Let's take a quick
L.
And there is a couple. There's one team in here. Before we break down the whole schedule, there is one team on here that Michigan does not play, which is Iowa. And I think we're gonna have Iowa has the best quarterback on their roster right now that they've had in probably the last 10, 15 years.
Yeah, and I just saw last week he went down with an injury.
No, did he?
So I'm hoping that it's not anything serious.
Yes, no kidding. Because Iowa always has one of the best defenses in the country. I have a feeling even if Iowa's defense scores twice, that might be enough to beat these Spartans. Just because I have no idea who's on this team. None. But they start the season off. Let me put the schedule up here for you guys. All right. Yeah, they have the first 4 at home. Central, I think, is a win. The Richmond Spiders.
Yeah, and I'm looking at this is the first time I've looked at Michigan State's schedule because I don't give a fuck about them. But to Harold's point on Michigan doesn't play against anybody, who the fuck is Michigan State playing against in these first 4 games?
Like I said, the schedule is very, very similar to Michigan's, with the exception of Iowa. Am I wrong?
No.
I mean, yes. The first 4.
And don't try to tell me that Washington is good because Michigan beat them 31-0 just a couple years ago when they played.
Yeah. And let's see, they're at Ohio State, and that's a 7:30 game on NBC. And to give you a price comparison, 2Ks, the tickets are as low as $91 for that game. $91. And yeah, the Michigan tickets are $237.
Mm-hmm.
So like I said, I don't know the personnel of the Spartans roster like I probably should. But Harry, to your point, I don't see. I would give the nod just a skosh to Michigan State having a harder schedule, but because like I said, it's basically the same people except for Iowa, and the first 3. I mean, but either way, if you're a powerhouse program, you should win these first 4 at home, regardless. So let's take a peek at Ohio State's here.
And I'll say Michigan State beats Central. I'll say they beat Richmond. I'll say they lose to Washington. I'll say that they beat Maryland. I'll say they lose to Iowa. They'll beat Rutgers. They'll lose to Michigan. They'll lose to Minnesota. They'll lose to Nebraska. They'll lose to Ohio State. They'll beat Indiana, and they'll lose to Penn State.
There you go, Harry. And I think you said it perfectly there, 2Ks. I think you said it perfectly.
And it'll be another 500 season for them.
Yeah,
that's a gauntlet of a schedule.
Yeah, I would. No. I think it's safe to say that Notre Dame's schedule is harder than that one.
Out of all the teams we've talked about so far, Notre Dame has the toughest schedule.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Let's switch gears over to the Ohio State.
Now, next season, not to jump to next season, but next season with Michigan playing their opener against Texas and then playing USC at USC.
Yeah.
And playing Ohio State at Ohio State. That's going to be a tough fucking schedule.
They have Texas the first game next year.
Mm-hmm.
Start of the Manning era
Yep.
for Texas. The Arch Manning era.
I need to look. I know that they play them. I need to look and just to verify and make sure that they're the opener, but I'm pretty sure that they are.
That would be electric. That would be electric. Well, the first 4. Ohio State has a little bit different road here, 2Ks. They start off on the road against Indiana. I don't think that's going to matter. I think we can say that Ohio State wins that one. And they're at home against Youngstown State and Western Kentucky. I think those are winnable games. And they go to Notre Dame, which we've already given our prediction on that. And they have Maryland at home, which I think is safe to say that that's probably a win. Then they go to Purdue. Again, I think that's a win as well. Then they have their sneaky Penn State game that they have theirs at home, which I think is a way bigger advantage for Ohio State as opposed to having that in Happy Valley. But I do think they handle business against Penn State. Then they go at Wisconsin, at Rutgers. I think those are both winnable games. Then they have Michigan State at home, Minnesota at home, and go on the road to finish up things in Ann Arbor. And we've already given our predictions on that one as well. So again, very similar cast of characters here is the Michigan and Michigan State schedule, with the only difference being the Notre Dame game week 4. And week 5, because Ohio State has a bye going into that one. So you have Indiana, Youngstown State, Western Kentucky. Shit, we need a break. Let's schedule Notre Dame right after that. Right after that.
The game I have for Ohio State, the lookout game would be the Wisconsin. Luke Fickell being the head coach there now, being a former Buckeye,
Yep.
That's going to be a big one. I think that's going to be a personal game for him. I think Wisconsin's going to be pretty good. They're going to surprise some people and playing in the West like they do. I expect Wisconsin to be the team that's playing in the Big Ten championship coming out of the West.
It's going to be interesting to see the dynamics between them and Nebraska with the new head coaches coming in. Yes, Matt Rule was shitty in the NFL. There was so many folks saying that he was prime and that's what he was supposed to do, was be a college football coach. So I think this is a put up. I'm not saying it's a put up or shut up, but I think he can silence a lot of haters with I'm not going to say an undefeated season, but at least a way better season, and at least give some of those fans hope, because there hasn't been hope in Nebraska in a long time. Same with Wisconsin. So, and I think both of those hires are very good for each one of those programs. I think they got the right guy. So it's more of a matter of how long is it going to take to get their system in, their players in, to see the results on the field. All right. Well, 2Ks. Anything you want to add to the schedule breakdowns here before we get into our top 5?
No, that's it. I think we've pretty much covered it all. I think I'm really hoping for Michigan Ohio State to be undefeated when they match up again. Do I think that there's a chance that teams could have a loss going in there? Absolutely. I mean, Michigan's going to have to go through a very tough Penn State team on the road. Ohio State's going to have to go through a Notre Dame and a Wisconsin. But I think when it all comes down to it, I think we see what we did last year, where those two teams play, and both of those two teams represent the playoff also. Yeah,
and then if it comes down to that, would I be absolutely shocked? No, by no means at all. 2Ks, let's jump into our top 5. Top 5 this week is top 5 college football players since 2000. So 2Ks, how about you start us off with your number 5?
Number 5, man. When you texted this to me, I was like, "Holy shit! Where do I go with this?" There's been so many good ones, but And we kind of said we were going to start at 2000. I'm going to go back just a couple years, and I'm going to go with one of my Homer players with Michigan. I'm going to go with Charles Woodson.
Fair enough.
Only defensive Heisman that we've ever seen. He's the only defensive player that I'm going to have on this list. But it wasn't just necessarily a defensive player. I mean, he lined up as a receiver at times. He lined up as a kick returner and a punt returner. Just a complete game changer, and made some of his most iconic plays in the biggest games, against Ohio State and against Michigan State. So I'm going Charles Woodson as my number 5 player on there. And fucking tell me I'm a homer, I don't give a fuck. He's the best defensive player I've ever seen in college football.
And your number 4.
Number 4, probably people will have him higher on the list. He played with some really, really good talent. But he was always just he just won a lot. He just was a winner. He always found ways to win. Sometimes it wasn't the prettiest thing. It was actually pretty ugly to watch at times, but he always found ways to win the game. And I'm going Tim Tebow, Florida Gator quarterback.
Let's see. That's the one that I'm having a hard time with. And when it gets to my list, I'll kind of explain why. But yeah. You're number 3.
Number 3, got to go Adrian Peterson. I know Adrian Peterson did even better in his NFL career as a running back, but when he was a running back in college, it was like watching a man amongst boys out there, and he just ran circles around them. To this day, the best running back I've ever seen in my time in college football. So that gives away my next picks are going to be quarterbacks, but no, he's the best running back I've ever seen in the college level.
You will not get an argument here out of that one. Number 2.
Number 2, I got to go Johnny Manziel on this one. Probably the best performance I've ever seen a college football player have was that game going into Alabama against best team in the nation, Alabama. Yeah. I mean, that defense was, how many NFL players were on that defense? Johnny Manziel, a true freshman.
Yeah.
Only true freshman to win the Heisman. I know that everything since then has been kind of a fuck up for him. But as far as a player that could just improvise and just make things happen, I don't know if we'll ever see a quarterback that you basically just give him the ball and let him do whatever the fuck he wants.
Yeah.
I don't even think he called plays. I think he just had guys run all goes. I think he had 4 receivers run all goes, and he just ran around, either threw it or chucked it and ran, and just put up. I mean, his numbers halfway through his freshman year in college were like numbers for quarterbacks in an entire season. Mm-hmm. So. Yep. Just incredible.
And
number one, man, this one's tough because I got 2 players on there, and number 1 best quarterback I've watched in college football. I think I have to go with, and there's a guy on this list that I left out of the top 5, who probably in a lot of these belongs in there, and the guy that I left out is Reggie Bush. Mm-hmm. But this guy beat that USC team that I don't think anybody thought could ever be beaten, and that's Vince Young. Vince Young in college football. I know that his game never panned out in the pros, but just in college football alone, what Vince Young did with that Texas team, and were able to go and beat USC, that's you can make an argument that that's the best USC, that's the best college football team we've ever seen. Yeah. And Texas went in there and beat them, and they beat them because of what Vince Young was able to do with his feet and throwing the football. Yeah. Vince Young was a very, very special college football talent.
Yes, he was. So yeah, 2Ks. I've got I have 0 gripes with your top 5. My top 5 will not have any homer picks, and it's not to say that. It's very safe to say that there have been at least 5 other performances by individuals that have not played at Notre Dame. But my number 5, I think I have to start out with Reggie Bush, just because I mean that him Leinart, that whole team was just insane, and for Leinart to bypass the draft after his junior year and come back just made that team even nastier. And getting back to one of the reasons you put Charles Woodson on your list is how versatile he was and the positions that he played. Reggie was slot receiver, running back. You could put him, way out as a receiver, punt return, kick return, which I think those were his most deadly positions right there. But yeah, his dominance during his time at USC. And for those haters out there, give him his fucking Heisman.
Yeah.
Give it back.
No question about it.
Give it back.
And look, if I didn't have my homer pick of Charles Woodson on the list, this Reggie Bush would have been my number 5. Yeah. I was kind of up in the air with Reggie Bush and Cam Newton on where I wanted to go on that, and I really couldn't make a decision on those two, so I just went with Charles Woodson, who I consider the best defensive player.
Well, my number 4 is going to be, I got to go with Adrian Peterson here. And for all the same reasons that you listed, and I would say instead of running circles around people, he just ran through them.
Yep.
He made your point of a grown men amongst boys is the perfect analogy here. He was on a whole other level, and probably the most dominant run. And there's other running backs that had prolific careers that you could put ahead of him, but I don't think you could actually do it. The one that comes to mind immediately is Saquon Barkley, here more recently. Saquon was the best running back in the country for 2+ years. But yeah, just as far as pure talent, I think AP's got him beat.
And in the time that AP was doing it, like that was when running backs were dominating football. Now what we've seen, and like when you talk about Saquon and in that generation of football, is it's more of a passer game. I mean, yeah, you always want to have that running back to rely on, but these defenses are not able to do, they're not able to box 7-8 in there like they did against AP, and AP just fucking ran through you and found ways to, still put up, 200-yard rushing games against defenses that were all bottled up on him. To where with Saquon, they had Trace McSorley in that, who was just as not much of a threat to run the football as their quarterback, and then had 2 NFL caliber wide receivers that play that are playing on Sundays now. So you couldn't just box everything in on Saquon.
And Saquon could also catch the ball out of the backfield. Yeah. And not to say that AP couldn't. It's just even in his NFL career, wasn't utilized that way. And why? He didn't fucking need to. You didn't need to. Well, my number 3. Let's see here. Much as it pains me to do it, I got to go to Tim Tebow here. And what I was kind of getting to during your top 5 is, he is one of the greatest college football players that we've ever seen. Did he do it with perfect technique, perfect mechanics? Absolutely not. He did it with pure heart, drive, ambition, all the things that if you're a football coach, you teach to your team. And if I was a football coach now, I would be playing Tim Tebow shit in my locker room, whether I'm a high school, college, pro, doesn't matter. That speech that he gave that's immortalized outside the swamp now, probably you could argue someone his age to actually have the wherewithal to say that, the way that he said it, with the emotion that he said it, instead of been like, fuck you, I really don't want to answer this right now.
Well, to me, you have to give so much credit to him. Look at all the talent that he played with at Florida. I mean, probably some of the best talent ever. I mean, so many NFL players on those teams, but look at the egos that came with a lot of those guys. We're talking egos that coaches couldn't handle in the NFL, and a lot of those guys, their careers fizzled out because they just couldn't, they couldn't handle their egos in the NFL. Yeah. And we know Urban Meyer wasn't doing that as a coach at Florida. So Tim Tebow is the next guy in line. So he's the guy that's holding all these egos in check. And I think Tebow took it as, and then and with that speech when they lost some games that they shouldn't have lost in that season, and Tebow come out and said what he said, which is, even though it all didn't fall on him and it all wasn't his fault, he took credit for all of it, and he took the heat from all the fans and from all everybody in the nation looking at what was going on there. He took all the heat, and that's a pretty special individual. You can say what you want about him as a player and how it wasn't always very pretty, but the guy always found ways to win, and he found ways to do what other people could not do, and that's keep that whole team in check.
And that's why he deserves to be in everyone's top five. Everyone's top five. My number 2. I got it. I'm with you. I want to put Vince Young here for all of the same reasons that you just said, but I'm going the other way with Cam Newton. All of the, and for a lot of our 2K crew, they might this might be shocking because I am not a Cam Newton fan. I never have been, and it has nothing to do with all of his off-field stuff, his on-field stuff. For the most part, once he left Carolina and went to the Patriots, I caught so much shit for saying that he is absolutely terrible that the Cam Newton fans pushed me away, and I'm like, fuck you guys. I'm done with you and all your fans. But stepping back and giving the dude his rightful due, that was a very magical run there at Auburn. And even translating into the NFL, he was an MVP for a reason. I mean, you even look back at some of our fantasy football days back then, he was being picked over a lot of good running backs because he got running back numbers as well.
Scored more touchdowns than anybody in football.
Yeah, he was the best goal line back in the league as a quarterback. So yeah, I've got to give him the props. And my number 1 might shock a whole lot of people. I got to go Joe Burrow. That LSU team was probably one of the most explosive teams, both sides of the field, and that's the main reason why they were national champions. I mean, but you look at the wide receiver crew that he had. They
have the 2 best receivers in the NFL on the same right now. Right now, the 2 best receivers in the NFL were on that college team together.
Yes. So it was a little bit easier of a road, but his intangibles to me is what might push some people away, just because he's not a rah-rah guy. He quietly goes about his business, smokes his cigars after dubs.
And you can make a case that it wasn't that easy of a road because he couldn't get on the field at Ohio State, and he never was given a chance because of what Ohio State already had there at quarterback. And he goes and picks it up at a whole different university and takes off with it and wins a Heisman and a national championship. That's not a very easy road. Like, I know that what he walked into and the talent that he had and the NFL caliber players that he had on that offense were incredible, but quarterback's still the most important position on the field, and you got to have a damn good one of those. And because if you don't, those wide receivers that we're talking about being the 2 best in the NFL, they're not as good as what they are if you don't have a damn good quarterback. So.
Right. Yeah, and what's it? He's the straw that stirs the drink. So yeah, that is my top 5. And for those of you that are watching or watching this on replay, drop us a comment. Let us know your top 5, because anytime we do a top 5 like this, and that's why I asked last week if people like the sports themed top 5s or just the fun top 5s, and I think we'll sprinkle it in every now and again because we are a sports show, but there's a lot of times where it's not. There's other cool stuff to talk about, and I think the top 5 is a good outlet for that, to have a little bit of fun. So, but before we get out of here, 2Ks, I did want to mention I let us down on the parlay this week. I let us down on the parlay.
I wasn't going to bring it up.
No, hey, I'll take full ownership of this because the Red Sox played the Tigers this week. So, in my opinion, it was easy to do on the app, of course, but it's like, okay, especially being a Red Sox fan, I want my Red Sox to beat your Tigers. Be it I have to root for your Tigers. You know what I mean? So, and vice versa. But you had Torque to hit an RBI, which he did. Riley Green to go over 2 bases, which he did. I had Justin Turner over 2 bases. I think was it 8.
Turner hit. I know he hit a home run in his second at bat. I'm not sure.
I think he hit 2.
He hit 2 home runs. Yeah.
And I had riding the hot hand of Tristan Cassis.
Yeah, man, that dude has been hot though. I
Yes.
mean, that one being the one of the 4 legs that did not hit.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been picking Cassis to 2 total bases about all the bets I throw out there,
Yeah.
here in recent games, just because he's been hot. I mean, we're looking at his average. I think is up to like in the 270s now, isn't it?
Yeah, he's been
And
on a
he
tear
was
the
in
last
the
2 months.
220s not that long ago.
It was a very, very slow start for
Yeah.
Mr. Cassis coming out of the gate, and
And it's not just the average coming up; it's the power numbers for
Yes.
me that have really taken off. I mean, it looks like every time I turn on a highlight or something of a Boston game, he's hitting a home run.
I'm not saying his power numbers are getting overshadowed. I just think there's a lot of folks that don't know who he is. He's not that. And hell, I think the leader in the clubhouse here, Matt Olson, unless you follow the Braves, probably have no idea who the hell Matt Olson
Right. I mean,
is.
you talk about Ronald Acuna, deservingly so, is who you talk about and who you think about when you first mention the Braves. But, if something was to happen to Acuna, which God, I hope that nothing does, or if he's to slow down a little bit or something, I think with the stolen bases numbers, as long as he stays healthy, he's the MVP. But you can make a very, very good argument for his teammate Olson with the home runs and RBI numbers that he needs to be considered in that also. And then, of course, Freddie Freeman with what he's doing with the Dodgers.
Yeah, and all 3 very magical seasons, and I think that like we talked about last week, I think that will come down to the wire as who actually wins that. But I think next week we'll kind of wrap up some bases, a little bit more baseball here. We're getting closer to the playoff time. Big shout out to the Cubs.
Yeah.
Just kind of a hint here. For the teams that bought and haven't sucked. They've been the hottest team in the league.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the
hottest
addition
team
of
in the
Candelario has been really good for them, and Cody Bellinger has been on a tear.
The re-edition.
Yeah.
The re-edition of Candelario.
Yeah, but to me, a lot of that credit goes to Bellinger. Bellinger
100%.
has been awesome, and that team has fed off of him and what he's doing in the middle of that lineup. And it's been going on since the All-Star break. And not that he was not having a good first half, but since the All-Star break, he's been maybe the hottest player in all of baseball.
I think it's been contagious because I think you've seen Dansby Swanson's numbers go up, and I think hitting is contagious. Hitting is contagious. So anytime you can get a guy rolling, it's better for the whole team. We'll update you on the most up-to-date playoff picture, because I mean, hell, by the time we meet here again next week, a whole lot of shit could happen. Lot of shit could happen. So with that being said, 2K Crew will get you out of here on that. Have a great week. We will see you next week, and as always, Jim Rome, we're coming for you.